Welcome to Bramley Moor Dock, Everton's new home, a place where history will be made, but not for you, or you, or you, or you, or you, or you, or you. You see, this is season 2 of a rebuild after Everton got relegated, and we took a rather Jacobin approach to things. Everyone earning above 30k per week found themselves on the chopping block. Oh, and nil Malpai, because, well, it's nil Malpai. We were left with just 5 players, 2 of which were being held against their will. Using real-life data to analyse success in the Championship and in-game data to identify players undervalued by the market, we compiled a ragtag bunch of misfits to guide us back to the promised land at the first time of asking. But now a new stadium awaits, and with it, a new challenge. Welcome to the Moneyball Clinic, where I'll be using in-game performance data to analyse the squad, create a simple tactic, and suggest practical transfer targets. Stage 1 is done. We tore everything down, cut our wage budget by 75%, and generated £222.5 million in net transfer profit. Now it's time for Stage 2. We need to identify our core, which players, if any, are likely to be mainstays in the first team for years to come. We need to bring in new players. There will be a lot of turnover, but realistically only 1 or 2 of those may end up becoming part of the aforementioned core. We need to implement development plans for our youngsters, identify who we expect to break into the first team, and the timetables for doing so. So let's start by taking a look at the squad. Bailey Peacock-Farrell was elite. Those are sensational goal prevention numbers. He has earned the number 1 spot and the contract extension. Not enough minutes for Billy Krellin, but he did his job, finishing with a positive XGP. João Virginia played 1 game and he's off to Estoril on a free transfer. We wanted loney right back Anthony Ralston to win his tackles and help progress the ball. He did both. Luke Ayling backed him up. Not quite as good at those metrics, but better in the air. Serviceable. And left back Connor Townsend led the team in assists, but his possession loss numbers scare me, whilst Jordan Hackett played too little to pass any real judgment. Jamal Lascelles was excellent. 1 is tackles, 1 is headers. Semi Ajayi in relief didn't play enough minutes, and when he did, he couldn't win headers for Toffee. Jared Branthwaite was sensational in the air, but a little worse on the ground. He still wants out, and we're still holding him captive. Theo Bellenard split time between both centre-back and left-back. Solid at both, but not spectacular. Jordan Houghton was okay. I'd prefer to see more in terms of possession 1 and pressures. Lewis Warrington was marginally better in those metrics and safe on the ball at the same time. Playing as a box-to-box midfielder, I feel the same about low-knee Lewis O'Brien. He was alright, but could do more. He was better than Ngalael Macau, who was creative but needs to be better defensively. Stephen Alzat was great as an advanced playmaker, created, scored, kept the ball safe. Scott Twine did a little bit of everything, played multiple positions and did well in all of them. Lewis Dobbin played on the right and was a dribbling machine, not a goal scorer though. Dixon was on the fringes, less dribbly, more creative, willing to do the hard work out of possession. Even Cavallero played on the left, another who was creative and scored goals. Stan Mills again did not really play enough minutes to properly judge, but I mean, look at that pizza chart. That's promising. Beto did the things we wanted. He won his headers, he scored goals. He didn't lose the ball much because he wasn't on the ball much. Youssef Hamiti was more prolific, but only actually in 2 games, a brace in the season opener, 4 goals against League One Lincoln. So this is the squad. João Virginia is already gone. Jared Branthwaite and Beto are players we've previously identified as our core, assuming we can convince them to stay. I would now add Bailey Peacock-Farrell and Stephen Alzat to that, with Jamal Lascelles and Scott Twine as players kind of on the cusp. 3 of those players have just 1 year remaining on their contract. We have an extension clause with Lascelles, so that's been triggered. Alzate and Twine have been rewarded for their excellent performances with new 4-year deals. Sorry to interrupt you, but right now, at this very point in the video, YouTube members and Patreons are listening to me explain why I deliberately overpaid Steven Alzate and Scott Twine. It's all part of the director's cut, which includes asides and tangents that I think are really interesting, but might not be central to the topic. Earlier I spoke about just good enough and why sometimes it's better to sign bad players. If this interests you, head on over to the link in the description. Right, back to the video. Obviously, they're not the only players with contract decisions that need to be made. Ralston and O'Brien's loans are due to end. Ralston was good, and I think he can make the step up, but there may be better options out there. We'll check the lie of the land. O'Brien I'm less convinced about. For the purpose of planning, we'll assume neither return. Semi Ajayi was not good enough. We're not going to extend his contract, and we might as well move him on. Sold to AGF for $1.5 million. That's a $500k loss. Pellenard was okay, but not outstanding. Gangon are willing to give us $4 million, so he's another out the door. It's a similar story for Jordan Houghton, who we sold to Rotherham for $1.5 million. Then there's Ivan Cavallero. I think he could be serviceable in a Premier League relegation battle. I'm not sure he has a future beyond that, and his value is such that it's kind of worth cashing in. Alaves offered $13.5 million, and we happily obliged. Luke Ayling and Connor Townsend also have a year left. I'm comfortable with both as backups. They'll be allowed to stay and wind down their contracts. Lewis Warrington is a player I'm unsure about. We'll trigger his extension and see how he copes in the Premier League. Now is a good time to talk about our youth. Let's add a couple of youth players to the squad planner. Francis Okoronkwo is a pacey striker that lacks refinement. I would expect him to need a couple of years worth of regular football before he's ready to compete for a spot in the squad. He's off on loan to League 2's Mansfield. Portelli is a new gen who could possibly contribute already, but best suited to a role we don't currently use. Again, a couple of years in the loan system before he's realistically in first team contention. That first season will be with MK Dons. Jordan Hackett I think could be a backup already, but I want to strengthen at left back and happy with Townsend as the relief. 1 season out on loan would be good. That will be at Fleetwood, who are in League 2, so maybe my assessment is a little off. Will Dixon is another I feel might be just 1 season away from being ready. Ideally we can get him experience at a highish level, somewhere like Swansea in the Championship perhaps. Stan Mills can contribute already, but I also want to strengthen the wide positions and I'm not sure I can guarantee enough minutes over the course of the season, so he's gone to Eibar. Finally, Yusuf Remiti. 16 games with only 1 goal contribution isn't good enough. He's definitely not ready for the step up. Hopefully, more regular first team football at Championship level will help his development, so he's been sent to Barnsley. I would have also liked to have loaned out Ngalai Al-Macau, but there were no takers. With all those moves, the squad is looking thin. We need reinforcements, but before we work out who to bring in, we need to talk about how we need to play. Last season, with real-life data guiding us, we adopted a high-pressing, possession-heavy approach. But is that going to work in the Premier League? I took a look at FBref between 2019 and 2023 to see if I could identify common tactical patterns between teams that survived their first season in the Premier League. Those teams were Aston Villa and Sheffield United in the 2019-20 season, Leeds the year after, Brentford the season after that, and in the 22-23 season, all 3 newly promoted sides, Fulham, Bournemouth and Nottingham Forest, survived. All took unique approaches, but there were some similarities. Every single team was in the bottom half for short passes in their respective seasons. All but 1 were in the top half for long passes, and 5 of them were in the top 5. 5 were also in the top 5 for cross attempts, with the other 2 just narrowly outside. We want to be direct and play wide. It should come as no surprise on that basis that 6 of the 7 teams were also in the bottom half for possession. By extension, 5 of the teams were in the bottom half for generating shots, with both Sheffield United and Bournemouth finishing dead last in that regard in their respective seasons. Despite that, 5 teams finished in the top half for conversion rate. Clinical finishing will be important. Guess what? Teams that don't have the ball defend a lot. 5 teams finished in the top half for defensive actions performed in their own defensive third. These actions were not tackles, they were not blocks nor interceptions, but clearances. 6 of the 7 teams were in the top half for clearances. Box defending 101. Armed with that knowledge, we can start to make adjustments to our tactical approach. The shape doesn't need to change, but I do want to adjust a couple of the roles, starting with the advanced playmaker. We don't necessarily want to funnel play through a single player, especially not centrally. An attacking central midfielder, getting forward to support the front line would be suitable here. I also want to change the striker to a support role. They still need to lead our press when appropriate, but will be more involved in holding up the ball and bringing others into play. I also want the winger to be more attacking, encouraged to stay high and get closer to the striker when he's holding up the ball. A no-nonsense centre-back can help our direct transitions, and we'll ask our right-back to be more direct too. Finally, our sweeper-keeper can drop down to a defend duty. In possession, we want more width. We want our passing to be more direct. We no longer build up from deep, and instead we'll look to pass into space to try and get our wide players running in behind. In transition, we'll counter, and to encourage that, we'll ask our goalkeeper to no longer roll the ball out and to act quickly. Out of possession, we'll drop our lines to a low block and standard defensive lines. We want to maintain that compactness, and we want to keep our trap and cross engagement so that we stay narrow. Last but not least, we'll keep our mentality on attacking. We want to be forward thinking when we have the ball, even if we're not going to have it that much. When we don't, we want to be aggressive within the confines of our defensive shape. It's time to take a dip into the transfer market. Last time out, we prioritised possession lost as a metric, but that's not as important this time round because we're taking a less possession heavy approach. Instead, our focus is core mechanics. Goalkeepers need to prevent goals, defenders need to win their tackles, centre-backs need to win their headers, the right-back needs to aid progression, and the left-back needs to create chances. The defensive midfielder needs to win possession. The central midfielders need to harass the opposition and score goals, with the attacking central midfielder also expected to create. The wide men also need to create. The right winger dribbles, the left winger scores. Our striker needs to win his headers and outperform his XG. For players already playing in a top 5 league, those thresholds drop a little. Of course, we're looking for players who are undervalued by the market. Our aim last season was to get the wage budget under $500,000 per week, which we did. Now in the Premier League, I'm willing to push that up to $750k. Now, if we adjust the budget accordingly, then the game recommends a maximum wage of $100k per week for star players. We're not going to be anywhere near that. In fact, if we remove the top values and shift everything up, that's probably a little more realistic. 74k per week maximum for star player. Ideally though, we're paying no more than 75% of the maximum for the respective pay band. Right, that's enough maths. Let's get to the signings. Marco Elkayard is our new backup keeper. He prevents goals. 500k from Vicenza, 10k per week. Marvin Sanaya at right back wins his tackles, is progressive, doing it in a top 5 league and roughly a third of the price of Anthony Ralston. 1.5 million from Strasbourg, 10.5k per week. Dominic Oroz can provide cover at centre-back, good in the tackle, excellent in the air, a possible heir to Jamal Lascelles, 1.4 million from Vitesse, 8.5k per week. Max Christensen for the pivot, 83% tackle win rate is sensational for a defensive midfielder, but, truth be told, I felt the options for this position were limited. Christensen was available for free from Hanover making it a low-risk move. He'll earn 16.5k per week. Jean-Yu Zhaolu as the box-to-box midfielder. He pressures, he dribbles, he scores. He even wins his headers. A colleague of Sanaya, he arrives for 1.1 million and 15.5k per week. Jacob Roy might be my favourite signing. He only registered 1 assist, but that's not his fault. An astonishing 0.40 expected assist shows he's been let down by his Go Ahead Eagles teammates. 4.6 million, 12k per week. Liam Delap was used on the wing at Troyes, which may have boosted his header win rate. It certainly didn't stop him from scoring at an exceptional knock. 5.5 million from Man City, 25k per week. He's our big signing. 7 permanent signings is a good start, but nowhere near enough depth. Thankfully, the loan market is our friend. F.A. Sarakaya is great at winning his ground duels and pretty decent in the air too. He's a player I wanted to sign permanently, but had just chalked a new deal at Marseille. Instead, a 1.1 million loan fee with a 5 million option to buy. 13.25k per week. Niels Nkunku is a former Everton player. He wins tackles, he creates chances, but I do have concerns about his possession loss numbers. A 900k loan, 20.5k per week, and a £3.5 million option. He'll be joined by teammate Rafael Onyedika. Eintracht Frankfurt are doing weird things. They signed him in January, didn't play him, and transfer listed him in the summer. A look back at the previous season at Club Brugge shows an archetypal box-to-box midfielder. A £1 million loan, 28.5k per week, and a £4.5 million option. Finn Azaz can provide depth for the attacking central midfielder role. He doesn't press enough, but he does score. He arrives with no loan fee and just 7.5k per week. There's an £11.5 million option I strongly doubt we'll ever consider. Azaz was signed on transfer deadline day. I love transfer deadline day, especially for loans. Teams are desperate to offload players, and often you can get favourable deals, like no loan fee and 40% wages. It can also help get us out of a hole. Injuries to Dobbin and Broim meant we needed more depth in the wide areas. Hugo Ekitike was, in relative terms, a wild card. For a striker, he was a dribbly boy who outperformed his XG. He can also play out wide, but if his skill set doesn't translate, we can push Liam Delap out there and use Ekitike up front. A 425k loan, 49k per week, and a £20 million option. And with that, we're set. We've got depth, and for the most part I'm confident we've also got sufficient quality. We've spent just £17.5 million, recouped 20 million with our outgoings, and our wage spend didn't even reach the self-imposed 750k limit. We're spending 650k per week. That's 30% less than the next lowest, Middlesbrough, and a tenth of what Man City is spending. All that's left to do is play the game. Same rules as always. All responsibilities have been delegated except those pertaining to transfers and tactics. Holiday between games, pick the starting lineup, then hit instant result. Repeat ad nauseum. In this virtual world, Steven Alzat became the answer to pub quizzes for years to come, as the first player to score at the Bramley Moor Docks Stadium. Beto netted the first hat-trick there in the very same game, as we marked our return to Premier League football with a rout over Newcastle. The fixture list was kind. Our next home games were against Southampton, Norwich, and Leicester. Come the end of October, we'd only played one of the so-called Big Six, a valiant draw away against Chelsea. The rest had been saved for November and December, so the decline was almost inevitable. Still, the early good form had propped us up, and at the halfway point we sat in 7th. Our position wasn't necessarily that much of a lie. Injuries had been kind to an extent I haven't experienced in FM before. Branthwaite no longer wanted to leave. I'm not one to look a gift horse in the mouth, so we immediately tied him down to a new contract, making him the highest paid player at 60k per week. Beto also dropped his concerns, but was less interested in an extension. Things look good, which means you know what's about to happen. It started with Marseille recalling F.A. Sarikaya. We replaced him with Kenneth Schmidt, a 37k loan deal, 14k per week, and yet again an optional fee we had no intention of triggering. Then came the injuries. Delap, Alzart, Atalo, Nkunku, Schmidt, and Azaz all had extended absences as we hit a brick wall in late February. A 12-game stretch with only one win to our name. That win was, however, our most important game in the calendar, 1-0 at home against Liverpool. We finished the season on a high with a 4-2 goal fest against the Bournemouth side at risk of relegation. Beto scored a brace, which took him over 20 league goals for the season and earned him third spot in the top goalscorer race. A country mile off Erling Haaland, of course. That was good enough for 9th place, exactly where we were meant to be according to XG. We barely had any possession. We were bottom half for shots, yet second in conversion rate. We had the lowest defensive line and we made the most clearances. I'm pretty chuffed with this. I had some reservations about using real-world data. It's well documented that FM can be punishing towards certain playstyles, so to avoid a relegation battle completely, it's a pleasant surprise. But so far everything's been short-term, putting blocks in place to get us back to where we belong, but not really defining a style ourselves. Next episode, we'll be creating our own identity as we build towards European qualification. See you then.